Have you ever really stopped to think about why some people see failure as a stepping stone, while for others, it's just a stop sign? We're going to dive into that exact moment, that tipping point, when a setback stops being a lesson and becomes a command to just surrender.
Right, so the common assumption is that retreat is a smart, strategic move. You pull back, you learn, you pivot. It's like a move in chess. But what if for some people, or even entire teams, it isn't really a choice at all? What if it's more like a flinch, a totally involuntary reflex?
It all comes back to this one kind of weird number, 0.0527. Now, it doesn't look like much, does it? But this tiny number is actually a statistically significant clue that unlocks a totally different way of understanding failure. Think of it as a breadcrumb, leading us to something much, much deeper going on under the surface. Okay, so to really get what that number means, we have to go deeper than just looking at what people do. We need a framework, a way to decode the psychological wiring that makes someone retreat in the first place. And that framework? It's called spiral dynamics. Now, the easiest way to think about it is as a set of different psychological operating systems. Each system is called a vMEME, and it processes the world with its own unique set of values and motivations. And look, it's not about which one is better or worse. They're just fundamentally different. For what we're talking about today, we're really just focusing on three of these operating systems. First, you've got the red system, which is all about power and survival. Then there's the blue system, which values order and purpose above all else. And finally, the orange system, which is totally focused on strategy and achievement. Three very, very different ways of seeing the world. Okay, remember our mystery number? Well, it comes from this massive global study. And what the researchers found was a really clear correlation between people who see failure as a signal to turn back and one of these psychological systems in particular, that red system. So to really crack this case, we need to get inside the logic of the survival-based system. What does the world actually look like when you're operating from red? Well, when you look at the data, a very clear psychological profile starts to emerge. See, the red system doesn't just see failure as a stop sign. It also correlates with feeling like the world owes you something, believing your problems are totally unique, and this is a big one, an inability to even visualize what's possible. It's a really consistent pattern. And this right here gets to the absolute core of it. When that red system is active, the need to survive is like a blaring alarm. It's so loud that it completely drowns out any chance of learning from a mistake. The signal gets totally distorted. So here's the crucial shift in perception. What an orange system might see as, useful market feedback, a red system experiences as a direct threat to its territory, to its very existence. It's not data anymore, it's a personal attack. So, you can probably imagine how this creates a huge conflict, right? I mean, what happens when you have these different operating systems in the same organization, all interpreting the exact same event in completely different ways? This is what we could call a prediction gap. The exact same action, retreating from a goal, gets processed in three totally different ways. For red, it's a relief. Hey, we avoided a threat. For blue, it's shame. We lost discipline. The mission is compromised. For orange, it's just frustration. What a waste of resources. It's one signal, but three completely different realities. And this is a huge trap for leaders. If you assume everyone on your team defines failure the same way you do, your decisions are going to have wildly unpredictable effects. An action that's meant to protect the team from a red perspective could be seen as a sign of total incompetence by someone with an orange mindset. And we're not just talking about a simple communication problem here. This kind of misinterpretation can actually trigger a really dangerous cascade that leads to total system collapse. The path to collapse is, well, surprisingly predictable. It starts with that signal distortion. Failure is no longer feedback, it's a threat. In response, the system goes into lockdown, hoarding resources to protect what it has. And this, of course, leads to rigidity. You can't adapt when you're basically in a defensive crouch. And any rigid system, under enough pressure, eventually shatters. The consequences for how things operate are, frankly, dire. It's like the organization's immune system starts attacking itself. The very things that allow for growth, learning, adapting, iterating, they all get shut down in favor of pure static protection. The system literally stops breathing. But what if you could predict this? What if you could actually see the hidden psychological wiring of a system and model how it's going to react before you even make a decision. This brings us to a fascinating and really powerful tool. It's called the algebra of conscience. And what it does is it attempts to turn these messy human emotions like fear, trust, and empathy into mathematical variables. Now, the goal isn't to calculate financial cost, but to predict the stability of the human system itself.
So how does it work? Well, think of it like a weather forecast for team morale. First, you take a snapshot of the team's current psychological climate, how much fear, trust, or red thinking is there. Then you introduce a change, let's say a budget cut. The model then forecasts how that change will affect the team's future psychological state. And the key insight here, the thing we've been building towards, is that the effect of any action depends entirely on the psychological starting point. The very same decision can either stabilize a system or completely shatter it, all depending on its underlying mindset. Context really is everything. Essentially, this whole thing moves us from just guessing to actually calculating. Instead of being blindfolded, we have a map. By modeling the psychological wiring, we can more reliably predict how a team will interpret signals like failure or pressure. We can see that chasm, that prediction gap, before we fall right into it.
And ultimately, what a model like this does is help us identify that critical tipping point, that precise moment when useful feedback stops being a compass and turns into an anchor, just pulling the whole system down.
Which leaves us with one last crucial question. When a system mistakes feedback for an existential threat, it's not just the project that fails. Trust breaks, learning breaks, resilience breaks. So, what else breaks when failure stops being a guidepost and just becomes a dead end?